welcome to this video on the 5HP18 clutch packs. The 5HP18 gearbox has 7 clutches. It starts with clutch C1 on the backside of the pump, which is followed by clutch B in drum B, which is held by the brake band. You can see the markings of the brake band right here. Clutch B also has the sprag bearing on its drum. When you look from the front of the transmission, so from the side of the engine, the sprag bearing should move counterclockwise and it should block when you try to move it clockwise. As you can see, I cannot move it clockwise, but I can move it counterclockwise. After the B clutch, you get the input shaft. Don't mind that needle bearing over there. And the input shaft has the drum for clutch A on it, and the inside of the input shaft has a drum which holds clutch E. Now after that input shaft you get your revenue gear set assembly. Behind the revenue gear set assembly you get the DG drum, which is the drum with clutches on both sides. This is the D side, used for reverse. This is the G side with the G clutch. This drum is notorious for failing. What happens is, especially on the 5HP19, is too much pressure is put on the D side, allowing the clutch to push itself out of the drum, meaning you have no reverse. Since the D is only used in reverse, having that problem still makes it possible to use all of your forward gears, since the forward gears do not require that drum, that side of the drum with the clutch. After the DG drum, you get the F drum, which contains the F clutch, and the F drum is positioned on top of the DG drum, like that. So in total you have 7 clutches: C1, B, A, E, D, G and F. What I'm going to do now is pretend to be overhauling these clutches. With pretending I mean that I don't have any new parts. So I'm going to dismantle every clutch pack, show you what it looks like without the clutch plates in it, show you what kind of damage I found on these hard parts in multiple transmissions, and then I'm just going to rebuild the clutch pack pretending to have new material, so you see what you have to do. You will see some seals and piston rings in this video, but I will talk about the overhaul kit and the seal stuff on the gearbox in another video. So this video is purely about dismantling the clutch and putting new clutch material in. Right, so we're gonna begin with the clutch C1, which is on the back side of the pump and the transmission, the case of the transmission drive parts. This is the actual clutch pack. You can see the teeth of the clutch plates in here. Between the clutch plates you have steel plates, and the entire clutch is being held into its position with that snap ring over here. This is not the piston, what you see here. This is just a cap protecting the pump, covering the pump. The piston is actually the outer ring under this entire pack. You'll see it in a minute. Now to remove this clutch, you're going to have to use a screwdriver on the snap ring over here. Push the snap ring towards the inside and push it towards you, so that a part of the snap ring pops out. I'm going to need 2 hands for that, so I'm going to put the camera down, put the entire clutch up. I'll use a lamp for some illumination here. Now I'm going to see if I can do it with my regular screwdriver. I'm just using flathead screwdrivers here, no special technology. So I'm going to push it inwards and take it out. So that's the snap ring. So you've got the snap ring out, which means the entire clutch is movable. You can just take out the clutch piece by piece. You will note, regarding all of these clutches, you'll note that the first steel plate that you take out is actually a very thick end plate, much thicker than the other steel plates. This is about how thick it is. We're going to put that on the snap ring. Now we get the first actual clutch plate. It looks quite okay, but it is not new anymore. You can still see some markings from the production, so it's quite durable. It has about 300,000 kilometers on it. But the new clutch plates that I used on a transmission that I fit to my car were noticeably thicker than the clutch plate that came out of the clutch packs. So following that clutch plate, we have a steel plate. As you can see, this is a thin regular steel plate, which is followed by another clutch plate, followed by another steel plate, followed by another clutch plate. And here's where it gets interesting. Once I have removed all of the steel plates and clutch plates, you see a big spring around C1. And what happens is, when this entire assembly is bolted up to your transmission, the transmission casing will cover this entire piece over here. And this spring is actually pushed against the housing when the clutch engages. And once the clutch disengages, because the valve body cuts off the fluid, this spring ensures that the entire clutch pack is released. So this spring makes sure that when the fluid is gone, the clutch instantly releases. You need to know for sure that you put this back in the right position. So as you can see, it should be pointing upwards. Don't put it down like it's a little roof. No, it has to point upwards. So this is probably the final steel plate. No, it's not. There's still a steel plate under it. First we get a regular thin steel plate. And the final piece you're looking at is always a thinner bent steel plate. And this steel plate, it may look damaged, but it's not. This steel plate is warped and ensures that the clutch engages gradually. So looking at the entire clutch, you have a snap ring followed by steel clutch, steel clutch, steel clutch, steel clutch, the large spring, steel, and the bent steel plate that makes sure the clutch engages gradually. So now you're looking at an empty C1 clutch. The steel part you see over here is the actual piston. To get this piston out, you'll need to use compressed air on one of these holes and you'll see the piston move. I forgot which hole it is exactly, but if you put compressed air around on this assembly on the holes, you'll see which one you need to get the piston out. Now you could start prying with a flathead once you have the piston out a little bit, but I recommend you use your fingers and be careful, because you can actually damage the piston if you use a flathead, so that even though you apply new O-rings, the piston will not seal properly. Fluid leaks cause all kinds of shift complaints, so you should be careful with that piston. This is basically a C1 clutch. Now, pretending you have new clutch material and new steels, you're just going to rebuild this clutch by mounting everything exactly the way around you took it off. So first you get that very thin bent plate for the gradual clutch application. Then you get a regular steel plate. You then get that large spring, and as said before, it has to be mounted just like that. After that you get friction material, followed by steel, followed by friction, steel, friction, steel, friction, and the thick steel end plate. So, assuming you've just rebuilt your C1 clutch, all you have to do now is apply the snap ring. I'm going to need two hands for that, so I'm going to put the camera down, put the entire pump on its side, and you don't need any special tools for that. If you just use your fingers, you use a thumb here to put the snap ring in. You then use your other hand to push the snap ring inwards, so you're able to put the entire snap ring under the teeth. And you'll hear it making clicking noises, which means you're doing the right thing. And finally, once you've got this bottom side lined up, we take a look at the top side, and all you got to do is use your thumb to push it inwards until it clicks and is positioned behind every teeth. This is your assembled C1 clutch. Now the C1 clutch needs some adjustment work. What that means is that you need to measure the distance between the snap ring and the clutch pack if it's not applied. So what you have to do is lift up the clutch pack just like that, and either measure the distance over here with the snap ring against the teeth here, or measure the distance you get at the bottom. You can measure both ways, and that distance has to be between a minimum and a maximum value. If it is below the minimum value, the clutch pack is too close to the snap ring. There's two ways you can go. Officially, ZF will tell you to use a thinner snap ring, but you can also use a machine shop to shave off the thick end plate to the desired thickness to get the desired clearance you need. If your clearance is too much, you need to add material. ZF will tell you to use a thicker snap ring to add material, but what you can also do is combine steel plates from other 5 HP 18 record transmissions to get the thickness of the entire clutch pack that you need. So once you've got that clutch in, snap ring on, and clearance measured, you're basically done with the C1 clutch. Now that C1 is done, we're going to move on by dismantling the B clutch. The B clutch sits in the big B drum, which has the teeth on the side here. The B drum also has the brake band around, which you can see from these markings. And dismantling the B clutch is somewhat similar to the C1 clutch, but the piston is a little bit different. So first thing we're going to do is use a thin screwdriver to get the snap ring out. Luckily this drum is heavy, so I can probably use one hand to get that snap ring out. And now we're going to do the same thing we did with C1. And again, we first have a thick steel end plate, a clutch plate, another steel plate, a clutch plate, steel plate, clutch plate, steel plate. And this is the entire B clutch disassembled. Now if you look on the inside of the B drum, without the clutch you can see the piston over here, and on the contrary of that C1, which only had the piston on the edge over here and a cover plate in the middle, this is actually your entire piston. Now to get to the piston you're going to need to remove that spring. C1 has that big round spring which is on the outside of the teeth. This spring is on the inside of the drum, and what you need to do is use a ring positioned on the spring here with a manual press to push it down to compress the spring. Once you have the spring compressed, you can use a very thin set of pincers to remove that steel part by simply taking it out, and remove that steel part by taking it out. You can also use screwdrivers to wiggle them out, but this is a little bit more difficult. Once you've wiggled those steel parts out, you can slowly release the pressure, and you'll see that the spring point goes upwards. You can then just take the spring out with your hand, and this will show you the piston. To get the piston out, you need to turn the B drum around, remove the sprag if it was still on, and look at the inside of the B drum. I'm going to take a little light here to show you what I'm talking about. On the inside of the B drum, you see a little hole over there, which you should also see on the other side. And you also see a hole over there. Those are the holes used to supply the piston with ATF. And ATF is used to push the piston against the clutch pack, engaging the clutch. If you hold your finger on one of those holes and you put compressed air on the other hole, you'll push the piston right out, and you can just take it out with your hands. This piston has an inner ring, an outer O-ring, and that's it. So you put a new inner and outer ring on it, you lube them in with Vaseline or ADF, push the piston down, put the spring back on, compress the spring, put these metal parts back in position, release the pressure, and then you've overhauled your piston. Once you've overhauled your piston, you can proceed by rebuilding the clutch. And you do so by taking new or used steels, depending on the condition of the steels. Add new clutch material and just mount everything back on the way you took it out. And at the end you have the thick end ring. As with C1, you need to apply the snap ring at the end. So I'm going to put the camera down, put B on its side, give us some light here. And I'm going to use my fingers to put one side of the spring behind the teeth, then compress the other side like that, and this will allow you to slot in that snap ring behind every teeth. So now you turn the B drum, you keep turning, and as you turn, you use both hands to put the snap ring in position. I'm at the end of the snap ring here, and all I gotta do now is use my fingers to make it click, and then we're done. Here it goes. That's it. So here we have a completely assembled B clutch. All you need in new parts is these clutch plates, the steel plates if your old plates are badly worn out or damaged, and you need the inner and the outer O-ring of the piston, which is supplied by the overhaul kit. With C1 and B done, we take a look at the input shaft. The input shaft has multiple seals over here which you get supplied in the overhaul kit. It also has a seal on the inside here that holds drum A on the input shaft. Now, drum A naturally has clutch A in here, and the input shaft itself has clutch E in here. First thing you got to do is get that drum off the input shaft. To do so, you can either use a rubber hammer, or what I used to do, you have the input shaft right here, you put the input shaft on a piece of cardboard, and what you do now is use the palm of your hand and apply force on the drum. That should get the drum out. There he goes. So now you can just put the input shaft on the drum side, take off drum A carefully, not scratching your input shaft on that shaft over here, shaft piece over here, and now you're looking at clutch A and clutch E. We'll begin with clutch A. To work on clutch A, you need to do a process similar to clutch B. Remove the snap ring, remove the entire clutch pack, and to remove this piston, you need to compress the entire piston, because as you can see, this piston does not have a spring over here. So what we're going to do now is take a screwdriver and remove the snap ring. And again, first you're looking at a thick steel end plate. And you're going to clutch, steel, clutch, steel, clutch, steel, clutch, steel, clutch, steel. So I'm just taking the entire clutch pack out. Keep in mind that at the end you have a steel plate at the bottom, and under that you have that very thin plate used to gradually apply the piston. So now you're looking at the entire clutch pack here. This is your clutch A, and here you see the piston of clutch A. Now to remove that piston, you need to remove this steel ring on the inside, and to do so you first need to put pressure on this piston downwards, and then you use pliers to open up the ring and take it out. And once you release the pressure, you can take out that piston, if necessary, by putting compressed air over there. If you do so, you need to put your finger on there and on the third opening right there. Once you've got the piston out, you can install an inner O-ring, an outer O-ring, and put the piston back in position. You then apply pressure again, put the steel ring back in position, and release the pressure to make sure the piston is okay. You then rebuild your clutch the same way you rebuild the B clutch. We start with that ground plate over here, the thin one, followed by a regular steel plate. Followed by a clutch plate, steel plate, clutch plate, steel plate, clutch plate, steel plate, clutch plate, steel plate, clutch plate, and the thick end plate. To finish the work on A, we're going to install the snap ring. This is really easy for me as my A drum is damaged. This is not regular wear and tear. I actually dropped this piece on the floor and this bit just snapped off. But since this is my learn transmission, it doesn't really matter because I was never planning on using these hard parts anyway. So I'm going to put the camera down, put the drum on its side, and again I use my fingers to put the snap ring in position. I use my left hand here to push the snap ring step by step behind the teeth. I can now use my right hand to pull on the other end of the snap ring over here, while the left thumb pushes the snap ring into position. And you're going to hear a click real soon. That's it. And this is your fully assembled A drum with clutch A. We will now proceed with the E clutch, which is located on the end of the input shaft. 6-cylinder models have a 5 HP 18 with a shorter input shaft for the smaller torque converter. This is a V8 input shaft, which is longer. Now to work on this E clutch, as before with the other clutches, you use a thin screwdriver to remove the snap ring. And as before, you just start dismantling the entire clutch pack. As you can see, the first steel plate is the thick end plate. For that one, I need a screwdriver because the spring here prevents me from using my fingers. Now we're going to use gravity to get that last one out. You are now looking at an empty E-clutch. As you can see, the entire clutch pack is out. Here we have our entire clutch pack, and here we have our empty drum. Here you see the piston right there, which has the piston has an outer and inner O-ring that you need to replace. But to get this piston out, you need to put pressure on this spring over here, this cup spring, by putting a ring on the cup spring, as we've done before, compressing that cup spring, removing this steel part with thin pincers and that steel part, and after you remove these two steel parts, you can release the pressure and take away this cup spring. Once you've taken away the cup spring, you can get that piston out by putting air on the right holes, which you will find on the back of the input shaft. Let me just get some light for you guys to see. If I remember correctly, you can use the hole right there to put pressure on. I'm not quite sure. It has been about a year ago since I rebuilt this, rebuilt a 5 HP 18 transmission like this one. But if I remember correctly, you just need to put pressure right here, as with the other clutches, to get that piston to come out. So once you've replaced the inner O-ring and the outer O-ring, put the piston back in position, put the cup springs on the piston, put pressure on the cup springs right here, install the metal parts here, and release the pressure on the cup springs, you can rebuild your clutch. And you do so, as before, by simply putting in a steel plate, clutch plate, steel, clutch, steel, clutch, one at a time, steel, clutch, steel, clutch, and a thicker end plate. As before, we now need to apply the snap ring, which we will do with our hands again. Since this is a very small drum, you can actually see the entire snap ring. But on the clutches before, the drum was so big that I couldn't get it on camera. But what you see now is I'm using my fingers here to push the snap ring downwards, which means it will start to put itself in the right position behind the teeth. And now for that last few centimeters here, you just push the snap ring until it says click. So assuming you use new parts, you now have assembled your input shaft with clutch E. The input shaft itself needs an O-ring over here and some piston rings here from the overhaul kit. We're now going to take a look at the DG drum. This is a big double drum which has the D clutch in the thick side and the G clutch in the thinner side. You can already see the clutch over here, and you can actually rebuild that clutch without taking the inside out. But I recommend using an overhaul kit to replace all of the seals, which means you also get various seals that you have to put on the inside here. Now, to get that D clutch out, again you use a thin screwdriver. You find the edges of the snap ring, which are right here. And I'm going to put the screwdriver in and wiggle the snap ring right out. There we go. And now you can use your finger and just take out the snap ring as you've seen before. By now you'll know how to do this clutch as well, so I'm going to see if we can let gravity do the work on this one. I'm going to turn this DG drum upside down, wiggle it a little bit, and as you can see, the entire clutch drops straight out. This is your D clutch. This is only used for reverse, so you should see a very fresh D clutch in your transmission, no matter the mileage, as you rarely use reverse. On the 5HP19, this drum is notorious for breaking the D side. What happens is that the piston puts too much pressure on the clutch pack, and the clutch pack will push the snap ring out of the teeth and grooves you see here. And once that snap ring gets pushed through the drum is useless and the clutch no longer works, which means you lose reverse, as this clutch is necessary for reverse. Since your forward gears do not need your D clutch, you don't lose your forward gears. So that is why you sometimes see BMWs with 5HP19 automatics that say reverse doesn't work, but forward works okay. Fluid changes won't help. You'll be dealing with a broken DG drum, and only a complete rebuild will work. Now, to rebuild this clutch, if you're really not going to do anything with the inside of the DG drum, you can just rebuild the clutch by putting all the parts back the way they came out. So what we're going to do is flip it upside down. This is actually the bottom. As you've seen before, you have one of those warped steels used to gradually apply the clutch. That one goes first. Then you get a regular steel plate followed by a clutch plate, and you need to make sure that those steels and clutches grab into the teeth you see. This is actually, you actually see a lot of clutch material here for a reverse gear. You would say that you never put a lot of torque on your reverse gear, so it wouldn't need a big clutch like this, but ZF thinks different. We're almost there. We've got the final clutch right here, and now we've got the thick end ring on top. I'm going to put the drum on its side again and apply the snap ring the way I've done before. So as you can see here on the bottom, I'm putting one side of the snap ring in, then I'm going to use my fingers here on the other side to push the other side inwards, meaning I can use my hand over here to push the snap ring in position. And now you're looking at your rebuilt D-clutch. In the overhaul video, the video about the overhaul kit and all of the seals you'll encounter, I'll take this piece apart, but I'm going to need a workbench and a rubber hammer for that. And I'll show you all of the seals you get on the inside here and how you have to treat this inner part. So now we take a look at the G-clutch. With the clutch removed, looking at the G side of the drum, you can see that you have to remove the shaft to reach the piston over here. You do so by removing the ring, which will allow you to use a rubber hammer on the shaft to remove the shaft. And after you've done that, you can actually take out the steel over here and the cup spring over there. Once you've removed the steel and the cup spring, you can use a screwdriver or compressed air on the inside of the drum to remove the piston that you see here. This is not a piston like the other ones. This is a molded rubber piston. The inside of this piston, which you can't see because it's behind the steel parts over here, is made of molded rubber. I recommend you use a new one because the old molded rubber piston may have little cracks or some wear and tear on the molded rubber inside. It is possible to reuse it if it's still in proper condition, but you shouldn't take the risk and just buy the molded rubber piston kit because it's not very expensive. Now, assuming you've put in a new molded rubber piston, put the shaft in and put everything back together on this side, you're going to rebuild your clutch the same way you've rebuilt all the other ones, by simply putting the steels and the clutch plates back in. And as with the other ones, every steel plate is followed by a clutch plate, and every clutch plate is followed by a steel plate. So you just start piling up your clutch pack until you've got the thick end ring to round it up. As before, we're going to put the snap ring in. So we're going to put the camera down. And as I've shown you before, I take one side of the snap ring to put in position. I then use my left hand here to push the snap ring towards the other side, which will click the snap ring in position. And for the final piece, you see that I still have to work on it here. There we go. Click, and it's done. And with that snap ring popping in, your G-clutch is finished. In a different video, I'll show you how to remove that shaft piece. And as you can see, you have a seal over here. There's some more seals on the inside, which I will show you in the overhaul video about the overhaul kit. So up till now, you've done all of the clutches except for one, which is the F clutch. And the F clutch can be found in drum F. Here you see drum F. This is the only drum that has some damage here on the teeth. The clutch plates of the G clutch that you see there slam into this drum, giving you these rough edges on the teeth. Because in the transmission, your F drum is positioned on the G side of the G drum, just like that. And when that clutch engages against the teeth of this one, it causes the rough edges on the teeth. Now, I've seen this on multiple transmissions now, also on somebody rebuilding a 5 HP 19, so I think this is regular wear and tear, meaning you should replace this drum when you overhaul or rebuild your transmission. To work on this clutch, as before, we first remove the snap ring by using a thin screwdriver and wiggling the snap ring to the inside and upwards. Here it comes. And then you use your hand to remove it. Since you've already seen all the other clutches, again I'll let gravity do the work. The entire clutch over here. And now we're looking at an empty drum F. You see that drum F also has a molded rubber piston because of that bronze looking metal part of the piston. The molded rubber is on the inside here, which you can't see through the spring. Perhaps if I use some light, yes, you can see some black rubber on the inside, and that's actually the molded rubber part of this piston. To get that piston out, you're first going to use a ring on that cup spring. You compress the ring. You use a thin set of pincers to take out these metal parts. Flathead screwdrivers will also work, small ones. Once you've taken out these metal parts, you release the pressure. You can then take out the cup spring, and to remove the molded rubber piston, you put air pressure on those little holes over there. There's one over there. There's one over there, meaning we also have one over there. And if you put pressure on that one, you need to use your fingers to close off that one so that your air pressure won't fly away. Once that piston comes out, you take the new molded rubber piston, you lube the inside with Vaseline or ADF, push it in, put the cup spring on it, compress the cup spring, install these two metal parts, release the pressure, and then you rebuild your clutch the same way you rebuilt the other ones. As you can see, we have another gradual clutch applier here, followed by a steel. As with the other ones, steel is followed by clutch, clutch is followed by steel until you've got no more. We're about done here. And here we have the thick end plate. As before, the snap ring needs to be installed. I may be able to do this from the top. I put the snap ring in position, and then I use my hand to apply force over here. And as I apply force, the snap ring moves into its position behind the teeth and the grooves. Here it comes. That's it. Snap ring is in position. F drum has just been done.